Okay, it's Tuesday morning. I'm on the train, I hope, to Zamość. I got the right platform, saw the notations on the screen, that's good. Asked a policeman if this was the correct train because it arrived 15 minutes before it's supposed to go, which is not necessarily unusual. He confirmed after going on the train and asking somebody that it was for Zamość, so I got on, found myself a compartment. And then a little while later, a conductor type came in and said, "Zamość?" And I said, "Yes." And he points me down, apparently second train, not train, but next car down. So I went down to the next car, and it was almost empty. Asked one guy, he didn't speak any English. Asked four guys, and they said yes, going to Zamość. And then I asked a gentleman in a business suit who spoke just a little bit of English, and he said yes, Zamość. And so I think I'm on the right train and the right car, because they sometimes split cars off at certain places that are going to different places. And if you're on the wrong car, even though you're on the right train, you're going to the wrong place. This is the Vistula River, which runs from Krakow down through Warsaw and exits into the Baltic at Gdansk. Will be the last pictures of Warsaw. So just to add another footnote to my comment on trains. So you have two significant problems when you're going to ride the train. First of all, making sure you're on the right train. Secondly of all, making sure that you're on the right coach or wagon or car of the right train. Okay, at our first stop, I get a little nervous because the first four guys I asked, they said, yes, this is for Zamość, but they got off the train. The second man that I asked, in the business suit, he is still sitting on the car, so I assume that's correct. Situation where you could feel like you're going to the right place and be very relaxed, only to discover later on in the day you're in the wrong place. So one of the clues might be that on the station billboard on the track itself, it may list it as two cities with a slash in between, and that may indicate that it's being split apart. Now, a conductor-looking woman went by, and I tried to ask her a question. She just blew me off, to use the term, with a rude shrug, because she didn't understand my English. But when she came back, I said, "Zamość?" And she goes, "Yeah." I go, "Dziękuję." So that may be another clue, nothing positive. It's like walking through the woods where you know there are dangerous animals. You're constantly looking for signs. You don't think that anyone gets attacked very often, but it can happen. So you look for bear sign, you look for tracks, maybe broken twigs, and certainly large or any kind of significant sound seems to stand out. And you look everywhere, constantly are on high. Now one clue I'm looking for in my paranoia is that if this car, which is one car down from the wrong car I was sitting in, is the correct car, and two clues suggest it is, the man and the conductor woman, then the front car at some point should disconnect, and it should be at the town of Chelm, I think it's C-H-E-L-M, and then a new engine should attach to this part of the vehicle, the car, and off we go. We're coming into another little town, I suspect, unless it's a far suburb of Warsaw, but it provides another opportunity for some commentary. I think there are perhaps people who think I am somehow a very brave person to go traveling like this without fear. And I can only tell you that that is absolutely wrong. There are times when I am constantly in a state of intrepidation, to use that skating word, and this is one of them. And then once you get to someplace, like when I finally get to Zamość, or even better when I get to Krakow and get settled into my hostel and then I feel very comfortable and my whole demeanor relaxes. And I gain more and more confidence and comfortableness with each hour that I'm there. I recall that once I got settled into my hotel in Mexico City, I went out for a walk. In the first hour, I was literally frightened. Of what? I have no idea. But after that hour, I never felt any kind of fear or trepidation again. It's always interesting when I come in a country to keep recognizing that people live essentially the same, at least in the parts of the world I've been in. You see the same kinds of stores, the same kinds of buildings, different styles, obviously different names, still the same kind of functions. Mobile, Mercedes-Benz back there, a little bit of open space occasionally. This is the main highway, I suspect. Some billboards, signs that tell you where to go, what direction to take, what road to take, turnarounds, banks, delicatessen there, new buildings going up. People living their lives trying to achieve the same conceptual goals as the rest of us. So when you ask the question, why do people have to go to war? It's perhaps the people with incredible visions like Hitler, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great. Perhaps more fundamentally, or equally fundamentally, it's a profound difference in the quality of lifestyle. Here, the quality is not what it is in the United States, nor is it even what it is in Western Europe, although it may well become similar, more similar, 24 hours as the result of being a part of the EU. But in places like Afghanistan, I suspect that the standard of living is so absolutely dirt poor that, and characterized by low standard of living, characterized by high unemployment, and particularly for those without any skills or good old boy connections like the young, and they are absolutely the key prime source of the fodder of the radical movements that create so much damage. So in spite of the way that we entered Iraq, it may be that when we leave it, somehow, if we're lucky and they're lucky, they will have a better vision of a free enterprise system and the capacity to execute on it, and somehow the ability to protect themselves from those who would undermine it for their own power and greed, like the Iranians and the radical groups, Taliban. For me, this is the cat's meow. I can move back and forth in this empty cabin to the aisle to look out the other side, or I can spend my time standing up here looking out the window at what I pass. This is an easy and fun way, in my opinion, to travel. These look like houses that might have been houses of the wealthy, or not. Looks like a little RV place. There's a new road building going in right there. Now here, for some reason, is coal, all separated by sizes. For what purpose, I don't know. And we're at the town of Otwock, which you can be absolutely positive is not pronounced that way. First of all, the W will probably be pronounced as a V. Okay, an update on the ticket. The conductor guy who actually checks to make sure you have the right ticket came through and said I'm on the right train, and I'm on one of the right coaches, but it just happens to be first class, which, is one reason why I don't find many people on it. But it only cost me 34 zloty to upgrade to first class, so that's about $11. I figured once in my life I should be at first class, just so I could say I've been first class once in my life. So now I'm riding first class. One of the benefits of first class is that there's a high probability I'll have this all to myself. I can keep the windows open all the way if I wish, which I do, to stay cool. I don't have to be concerned with other people's feelings. Sandy soil typifies much of what I'm seeing in Poland. Small little villages seem to dot Poland, at least the areas near the railroad. You don't see much in the way of cows or livestock, and yet the land seems to be simply developed or not developed at all, which would seem like it'd be appropriate for dairying. This is a school of some sort. A few pretty little stations. Pretty little town with a fountain that's functioning in their little park. Very, very nice. I don't know what this little town used to do, but there are 15 tracks right where we're going through right now. Here's a little concession that will go through the trains. Pretty, actually. Suggesting that at one point in time, steam trains here. The old station now being restored. That's encouraging. I think the beauty that I see in Poland is in its greenery. Whether it's the variety of trees. I think also the fact that it's farming lands, agricultural lands, are not huge, giant areas, but they're broken up by trees. Highly inefficient, but very pretty in its context. Big expanses of asphalt suggest that at one time many of these places did some kind of substantial commercial work, but I don't know what it was. There are many of these abandoned sidings. I'm saying this is abandoned, it may not be, but it's literally sitting out in the tules that at one time were used. Whether they were simply built as a way of offloading construction materials for the building of one-time towns or whatever, I don't know. What's fun is, by traveling this way, is you get to poke into towns, into people's backyards by the hundreds. It's not an intimate experience, but overall, collectively, it kind of is. There's folks waiting for a train going the other way, obviously. You can just feel the quiet of these small towns. Slower pace. Maybe not desired by them, but real. Train just arrived moments ago, and our train, I'm sure, is timed to pick up in a couple of seconds any of those who want to go. Well, that was quick. It was less than a minute. inside the track area. Don't know what that huge pipe system is. Connected to that factory, no doubt. Nice little station. Plots like that are often worked by hand. This is fairly unusual for me. Fairly large farming complex. Still see that it's relatively small plots of land, although not as small as what's called the pig and potato farming. Here are cars loaded with coal, and a very small coal. This may be going to that electrical installation. That big one that we saw has its fuel. Here's another encouraging example of revitalization, the restoration of what I think is the main train station here. I think that is for hops. An hour from Zamość. Here's what the connection looks like between this engine and this train load of coal. Doesn't look as substantial as I would have thought it might be. Unless the engine is only pushing, then it would make sense. Just another day, normal day in eastern Poland. Just felt a substantial clunk. I think an engine way down there just pulled away from us. And this may be the place where we lose our engine. This looks like a sizable gap in the shadow, suggesting that there's nothing there. Here comes a gentleman conductor type who's checking connections, I think. He's clicking something or checking something. Maybe we've got a train an engine that's back down to us. Yes, he's signaling something. Maybe we're going to start going the opposite way now. The device he's carrying is like a little hammer. He's hitting things with it, and then he signals people to get going. I don't know if we've got a train on that end or an engine on that end or not. All the people who work with the train system in the main, when they're dealing, at least with me and with seemingly with other customers, take their jobs extremely seriously. They don't go in for humor much or pleasant social interaction. On the other hand, you have to say, well, some of the trains are old. We're going the other direction, so that's what we did. We got a new engine. The trains run extremely well. By that I mean on time. Now we're going by what looks like may not be an abandoned factory of some sort. We just shifted to a different track. I'm guessing we're going to start doing a little loop to the left or to the south and towards Zamość. Don't know what kind of factory that might have been, or it is. As you can see, we're beginning our turn to the, I would guess, almost due south. It's about right there. We should be going a little bit more southwest. I mean southeast. It'd be interesting to know what percentage of the line or the system is subsidized. In other words, it doesn't support itself. You have to wonder under what time frame, in other words, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60, 80 years ago, was this a vital railroad area that required these rails. I don't know if this is a natural lake or a reservoir. Again, some of the beauty of Poland's landscape comes from its unsophisticated small plot farming without the fences, without the heavy equipment, with the great variety. It's interesting to wonder if some giant global agricorp will someday find Poland to be a resource. Come here, buy huge amounts of land. The EU will have helped them develop a great transportation infrastructure. They'll bring in the equipment and take it over. In the back, two men are working on a little gazebo area. These are beautiful homes. The unimpressive remains of the old station. Maybe there's a newer one farther up. Nice little greenhouse, pretty tower. Nicely maintained apartment complex. Lana 2. Again, some imaginative coloring to break up the Stalin look. That's the factory that must support this area. Here's a large production greenhouse operation. A pretty bush. Up until this stop, I was feeling very important as first class because I was the only first class passenger on. Looks like a man has gotten on who's first class from here to Zamość. Looks like a propane operation there. Interesting insight, somebody going glider flying in eastern Poland. Look how slow the prop on that plane is turning. A little bit of unnervingness here. We stopped. We're about 20 minutes from Zamość, supposedly, but now we've lost our train, our engine, and we're getting a new engine. We just got a new engine, so we're going back the other way for another 15 minutes. We will be, or 20 minutes supposedly, in Zamość. It's interesting, all these little changes. Definitely pays to get on the right car. And it's a whole lot easier if you can get on the right car that's going all the way to where you're going, no matter how many times they change it. Just don't get off. Here's the train that just left. I would swear that that car said it had Zamość written on it. So maybe both of the trains are going there. But my conductress assured me that we're going to Zamość. Notice this mirror effect here. You can see it a bit better. Looks like we got a little malfunction going on here somewhere. That little thing sticking out down there, that handle, he pulled on that and that released some air. I'm going to try it again. I guess we're rolling. There are big black storm clouds over there, as you can see. My reckoning, that should be to the northeast. There's a very sophisticated looking greenhouse operation. You have to have money to build something like that. It might even be hydroponic. I think it is. That's no slouch of an operation. It's our glider. Updraft, I suspect. Okay, this is my room in Arcadia Hotel in Zamość, and it's room number 55, right next to 33. Don't ask. You enter in here like this, and this is the room. Nice enough. Old, 50s furniture, probably more than adequate. The big room here, very nice bathroom by many standards. Tile is a great way to cover up the past. Hopefully there's hot water. This is the most expensive that I've spent for a hotel, and would be the most expensive unless hostel cost me a lot in Germany. And that's about $45 a night. I know, woo-wee. Actually, when I got here, there were no rooms, but they said, the lady who spoke English, she said, wait a few minutes because people are supposed to confirm their appointment by 3 o'clock. They did not confirm, ergo I got the room. And the beauty of this room is, not my position here, but of this hotel, it's right around the corner. We're on the square, right on the main square. It's my first night in Zamość. I just had dinner, and the sun is getting ready to set. And it's creating some nice colorations on these buildings I want to get. So I'm just going to do about 180-degree pan. This is the City Hall. Next couple of days I'll look at all of this much more closely. Here's some nice window displays of kitchen and dining stuff. Don't know what this older building is. Interesting looking though. I have no idea what this oddity is unless it's some mythical character who's basically a head with teeth has just defeated this human type thing lying on the ground, all carved out of wood. Just found this to be a kind of an interesting bit of architecture. Noticed how the steps have either sunk or been worn or both. This is one of the other 3 squares that were the center of trade in this small town back in the 16th and 17th century. These are original houses. The town hall provides the information. Tour center provides a very nice guidebook of Zamość for 3 zlotys or złota or something like that. And so we'll start here with the city hall. Okay, we'll start our tour with the town hall on the Great Market place or square. And starting with this cartouche, this is called, when they have this kind of a, it looks like a sculpture plaque on a wall. This cartouche was placed by Thomas, or for Thomas Zamość, who was the son and second entailer. Need to look up what that legal term is, somehow related to wills, trusts, estates, all that stuff. I assume it's like a coat of arms, but for a specific individual. This was considered to be the most beautiful square, one of the most beautiful in Europe at its time. That's an admission. Self-serving perhaps, but it is a pretty and impressive place. Pretty mainly. Impressive not as much as many others, certainly those in Florence. I'm standing dead center, but I'd swear that brass top part there was slightly rotated to the left. The clock was placed at some other time. This is the coat of arms of the town. And this is the Baroque portal, entry portal, dating back to the 17th century. There are 3 plaques placed on the cathedral, or on this town hall. This first one on the right is recognition of the old city of Zamość by UNESCO and its hopeful preservation in the future. I wonder if it shouldn't be considered a crime equal to humanity when cultural artifacts are destroyed like the Nazis did solely for the pleasure without any military purpose at all. This plaque to John Paul, the Pope, first Polish Pope, revered to say the least in Poland, not just for that reason, but for his courage during the communist period. And this deals with the awarding of the Grunwald Cross award to the town. Grunwald was one of the great battles, and so somehow that has a relative significance. From this height, a slightly different perspective on the square. Certainly one that would have been a little more aggrandizing for those important people who stood here and addressed the populace. But try to go back to the late 16th century, 1570, 1580, something like that, and picture the bustle and activity, the mix of languages and voices, the bartering, the trading going on. This is apparently a patch of remaining cobbled surface from the 17th century. It was also at this place that a pillory stone stood. Pillory stone was where you tied people for flogging, or if you were going to burn them. Hard to imagine. There's also the site of executions, beheadings, or being torn to pieces, to use the terms of the guidebook. What joy did they get from that, except to some sanctimonious pleasure that I attribute to the power greed of the Catholic Church at that time? It's been subdued, kind of like a somewhat toothless lion now, but one woman was beheaded for apparently poisoning her husband and having an affair with a manservant. That, of course, seems justifiable. This first house in green was designed by Bernardo Morando, an Italian architect who Jan Zamość had hired to actually design almost anything that's important in this town. And the guidebook alludes to an Oriental influence in all of these Armenian homes. I don't know what that Oriental connection is. And for some reason these are referred to as parapet walls. I don't know what that meant. I thought a parapet was the top part of a fortress's wall, designed for defense with slots in it, but maybe not. And then these arcade arches underneath the fronts of the buildings, formed an integral part of the building, are typical of this community. Let's take a closer look at the detail up there. First thing that stands out to me is these, what looks like brass devices, probably for funneling the water off the roof. These probably have some religious significance. I don't know what it is. This is all stucco work. This house is referred to as the Upper Angel House. I want to get that graphic up in there in the middle, and then we'll drop down and take a closer look at the angel. But from whence it gets its name. Now this is a low relief of two lions. You can see them at the top, and they have killed the personification of evil, which is the dragon that you see at the bottom. And then this is the Archangel Gabriel holding a lily, which I think is a symbol of peace. Blue house graphic is representing a married couple. Perhaps that's the Oriental influence, not the couple, but the design. And I'm sure these graphics had a very significant meaning at the time, indicating the family. And the fourth house of these oldest of houses is, to me, the prettiest. Those little, whatever you call them, shelled niches there, perhaps held some kind of statue, maybe not. The beautiful colored work above the door, above the windows, to me is very pretty. And then this is the Madonna, who represents, of course, everything that's good, etc., etc., etc. Standing on top of a subdued dragon, the personification of evil. But that's a very pretty design. This is, in my opinion, the most interesting and pretty building. It was built in 1740. And these next four houses are called the market houses, and they're pretty simple, straightforward, except for this one has a little bit of decoration on the top. Perhaps the most interesting parts of these buildings are found on the entryway, so we'll go take a look at each of those. This house was built in the 1720s. The same family occupied it for 170 years. Here's the original doorway entry. And again, these little designs, probably just like the Medici of Florence, define the family, graphically at least. The interior vaulting here, I suspect, was done mainly for design aesthetic value. Here there's no specific description of it, but remember, the designs of these would have been recognizable to other merchants and also would be a way of identifying a particular business. This last house has a very interesting ceiling. I mean, at least that it's some kind of decoration. Almost looks like a scorpion, but I don't think it is. It's some kind of graphic. Actually, almost looks like a Teutonic Knight graphic. Let me turn around so you can see it better. Yeah. I don't know if it is, but maybe this is a German house, I don't know. But notice that there are three of them pointing to three of the cardinal directions, or at least left and right and down the center of this hallway. And then here, differently, is a floral. It doesn't seem to be a particular pattern for all this. Here's two opposing facial sculptures, maybe angels, with another one at the bottom. The bottom ones all have these little faces. It is symmetrical. In other words, what we just saw is appearing over on this side of the entryway also. And here's the actual portal. And the hallway is kind of interesting, only that it's quite narrow, but it has nice graphics inside. and each of the doorways has a distinct portal. This looks like a higher design quality than the others. And the next batch of houses on this eastern side is under St. Casimir, built in the 17th century. And this is his patron saint, St. Casimir, duh. And the last house along here has been devoted to chemistry. I think that means pharmacy. And it still remains a pharmacy, apparently. This house is the only one that has any apparent interest, and that's in its window portals. So we'll have to take a look at the detail. Not much, but some. So now we'll focus on the entryways to these houses, which are a little bit more interesting, actually. And having said that, this seems anything but interesting. Weathering away substantially, probably made out of some kind of soft rock in this area. Comparatively speaking, this looks to be one of the most elaborate of the portals. Notice the heads, a man on the right, a woman, and perhaps a child, or I'm guessing from the wings, an angel in the center. The rosettes, very delicately made arch. It would be interesting to know what the culture of these people was. The buildings are relatively plain but distinguishable. The arch is relatively plain, a couple of them somewhat ornate. This one rather straightforward. That apteca, I think, means pharmacy. But here you can see, pretty elaborate, probably a coat of arms in the center, a couple of angel types on the sides, but again distinguishable and probably known in its time for those icons. And perhaps this, again, substantial doorway would have represented the prime office of the people who operated here. Okay, this is the southern side. Actually southeastern side of the square. Again, we'll go take a look at the interior archways, since they seem to be the most interesting, distinguishable features of these houses. You can imagine, here's a nice view down this arcade, which is very similar to buildings in, for example, Venice. Like the fish market and the vegetable market have these kind of arcades around the buildings. And this is probably where the idea came from, Madonna. Here a simple entryway, but an interesting and old-looking access to some kind of underground area beneath here. How old this is, where it goes, I don't know. This is that house that we just looked at, and they keep referring to the Mannerist. I have to go back and find out what that is. I think it was a northern European variation on the Renaissance. Okay, the inside of this hallway, far more interesting than the others. It looks like a man's face, unless it's a lion. Some floral rosettes. Another human face here, and we'll rotate to see it. A woman's face. Maybe they were a couple. The lion, if it's that, and it does seem to be that. And again, another man, much more bearded, but with the old Polish mustache. Here, what appears to be a woman's face, maybe not. And followed by a man's face. So maybe these are facial masks, if you will, of prominent family members. Compared to the other interiors, this one's very nicely thought out, very nicely executed. Photography shop. A great display of old cameras. This is the Burn House, apparently one of the first stone houses. We'll look at its arch and a remnant of an old window from the Renaissance period, or Renaissance door frame rather. Certainly the columns, the Roman/Greek look of the lintel above, or whatever you call that when it's in a doorway. The arch, the angels we've seen on either side. I wonder how old these doors themselves are. You can't get too close a look here, but somehow this looks to me to be a significant graphic, although I don't know what it is. This is the Renaissance doorway. Why it's Renaissance, I don't know. This house is, of course, famous because it was not only designed by Bernardo Morando for an Italian merchant in the 1590s, but from 1599 to 1657, the house belonged to Jan Zamość, and it may have been that connection that got Bernardo the job of building almost anything important in this town. Interesting that if this is the original doorway, it's extremely simple and understated. And apparently very Renaissance, if that last little fragment of door was Renaissance. The ceiling on the arcade is a little bit distinguishable by these, I think it may be a fleur-de-lis motif, just guessing. Now we're in the southwest portion of the western south wall of the building. Now this is an interesting description. The second Morando tenement house. Wonder what the word tenement meant then and by these people. And the classic Roman/Greek architecture, perhaps. The lions have dumped the angels, except for the trumping angel over the arch itself. Now this house, I'm not even going to make a flying jump at this name pronunciation. It was built 16th century, but it suggests a very interesting dynamic. Towns that were outside this fort town would build a house here to keep its treasure safe. And it proved to be a wise idea because it was never, to my knowledge, defeated in battle. Relatively simple. Probably the center there held perhaps some kind of painting that reflected the town. This house is unnamed, at least so far as the plaque's concerned. Interesting motif other than the angel there in the frieze, but whether these represent swords or leaves or corn, I don't know. And following in that concept, this is a Terobin house built in the 1600s, again for the purpose of protecting their assets. More substantial in its design concept. And the detailed reliefs of a face seems to be a man and seems to be a woman. And the interior ceiling is far more elaborate than what we've seen other than that earlier one, but mainly just graphic. There, an archway over that door must have been somehow important as opposed to these rather square and simple doorways. Scanning quickly just to identify, this is the western wall of homes, mainly owned by Greek merchants. Interesting, it's probably this center one. It was built by Jan Michael Link, a famous Zamość architect and military engineer. Easy to imagine an architect is not going to leave a building as simple as many of these others. These two busts up here, one is of Minerva, a Greek goddess, and we'll focus quickly into that. And then the other is Hercules dressed in lion skins. Certainly if I knew the stories behind each of these characters that would add more interest to why he chose those. Now the frieze underneath the windows features military armament, so we'll get in close and take a look at that. I can't tell if that's a disembodied hand or what. Appears to be a couple of helmets. The building certainly says, if you have a clue, I'm an architect, but it also says I'm heavily committed to the military. The restaurants here have done a nice job of providing a quality cafe feeling, a comfortable and warm feeling. Certainly in the early days, I doubt there were any trees here. They were just too heavily involved in business, probably. So now we're in the arcade and we'll take a closer look at the doorways. First one is simple in design. I don't know if a knowledgeable person could attribute this architecture to Greek or not. Again, this doorway, and I don't know if this window was an original or what its purpose would have been. Perhaps it looks like a ticket window of some sort. A bit of irony, the entryway is perhaps, again, one of the simplest that we've seen for the Link House, the military architect. In this first set of four houses, this doorway is interesting only because it's so much larger an arch. Whether it was actually used this way with the wood interior to the door, I don't know. Again, just for identification, the last four houses on the west side, and we'll go into the arcade and look at the doorways. Nothing is of interest here. I take that back. There is some small detail that might be somewhat interesting. For what reason, I'm not sure. There apparently on these friezes 14 monkeys. See the one on the left there? The other on the right. Just finished walking these past these four doorways, and there are none that are of any interest at all. I mean, to me, they're relatively ordinary. Here I am. I'm at the corner of Ulika, Stashika, and just to orientate you, okay, there we are. If you look at the Great Market, in between 7 and 8 is the street, and I'm at the very left corner. And as I rotate here, and I am now doing it, I'll lift the camera and we'll be looking at the cathedral. So let's take a closer look at that. Okay, this is the tower. It's about 40 meters high. An interesting story, there are 3 bells in it. One called Jan for Jan Zamość, and the second one called Thomas, and then a third. But during World War II, the bells were saved by the Home Army intelligence service. Nazis wanted to cut the bells up and turn them into war equipment, but they convinced the Germans, who were looking for German antecedent history in this town, that these were German bells, and so the Germans did not damage them. It's interesting that in this fence that I'm walking down, there's a motif that's kind of curious if it's what it is, and it may not be, but it looks like a sword point in the form of a cross with that Eastern Mediterranean or Arabic half moon, but the whole thing kind of looks like an anchor. So which is it and why? Interesting old building. You wonder what it would have looked like when it was new. Did those little decorative things between the 2 floors, windows, have any kind of painting or decoration on them? It looks like they've gone to the effort of restoring either the roof and or those whatever you call them. Okay, we're obviously at the rear of the apse of the church. There's the tower in the background. To the lower right-hand corner, you can see the statue of John Paul, and we'll come visit that in a few minutes. We'll look at the architecture from behind. Clearly it's something different than the Gothic or Roman that we're used to seeing. I'm used to seeing. One thing the city has done that I appreciate is put up these plaques on the famous buildings, including an English version. That much of this should look like what I saw in Italy should be no surprise, since it was built at the beginning of the Baroque period, right at the end of the 16th century, and by an Italian. So very ornate. Again, a church built by Jan Zamoyski, 16th and 17th century. I don't know what you call this kind of architecture. It's a heavy architecture, blocky, somewhat strange. I think it's inelegant, but others may disagree. I wonder if that portion at the top had any kind of graphic in it, other than that low relief stucco work along the edges. Of course, the most dramatic part of this complex is the tower. That round area looks like it should have held the stained glass, but no evidence